The war had been going on for 11 years, and the Velithari were losing. Not quickly, not in the dramatic way that makes for good stories. They were losing the way a river loses its bank. Slowly, steadily, one system at a time. The Kreth swarm would arrive in a sector, strip it of every living thing, and move on. There was no negotiation with the Kreth. They did not have diplomats. They had hunger. The Velithari dominion was old. Their civilization had lasted for 9,000 years. They were tall, elegant beings, with skin that glowed faintly with bioluminescence, soft blues and greens that shifted with their moods. They valued order, tradition, and control above all things. Their ships were beautiful. Their cities were works of art. Their military doctrine had not changed in 600 years. And it was not enough. So when the High Council gathered in the Great Hall of the Archon's Palace on Velithar Prime, the air heavy with the light of a dying argument, someone finally said the word that no one wanted to say. Humans. The Terran Confederacy was small, 42 colony worlds, a modest fleet, and a reputation for being loud, messy, and unreasonably hard to kill. They had only been in space for 3 centuries. By Velithari standards, they were children who had just learned to walk, and were already picking fights in the yard. But they had ships, they had soldiers, and they were willing to help, for a price. The price, as it turned out, was not money or territory. The humans wanted legitimacy. They wanted a seat at the galactic table, and the Velithari, in their ancient wisdom, had a tradition for sealing alliances of this kind. A marriage between houses. The council debated for 6 days. In the end, they chose Lady Salith Varani, third daughter of Archon Varani himself, not the eldest, who was being groomed to rule, not the second, who commanded a battle fleet, the third, the quiet one, the one who could be spared. Salith received the news in her private chambers. Her skin flickered a pale, cold blue, the Velithari equivalent of swallowing a scream. She read the order twice, then she set it down, straightened her robes, and told her attendant to prepare her travel case. She did not cry. She did not argue. She had been raised to serve the Dominion, and this was service. It did not matter that the service involved binding herself to an alien she had never met, from a species she privately considered barely civilized. Duty did not require her to feel good about it. It only required her to do it. The human they sent was not what she expected. She had expected a politician, someone polished and important. Instead, she got Captain Aiden Cole. He was a naval officer, 34 years old, with a face that looked like it had been assembled in a hurry, and a body that was compact, scarred, and roughly half her height. He had been chosen, she later learned, because he was the only one who volunteered. The bonding ceremony took place in the grand atrium of the Archon's Palace. 10,000 Velithari filled the viewing galleries, their skin glowing in coordinated patterns of formal respect. Though Salith could see among the younger courtiers the telltale flickers of barely hidden amusement. Aiden stood at the altar in a borrowed Velithari formal coat that was too long for him. He had clearly been briefed on the ceremony, because he performed every step correctly. The 3 bows, the offering of light, the speaking of the old words in a language his mouth was not designed for. He mispronounced her family name once. He stopped, corrected himself without embarrassment, and continued. He did not mispronounce it again. Salith watched him with the careful blankness she had perfected over 20 years of court life. He was trying. She could see that. It did not move her. Many small creatures tried hard. It did not make them significant. The reception afterward was worse than the ceremony. Velithari nobles circled Aiden like predators examining something they could not decide whether to eat or ignore. They asked him questions designed to expose his ignorance. How many cycles had humanity been spacefaring? Did humans truly die after only 80 or 90 years? Was it true they needed to sleep every single day? Aiden answered every question simply and without defensiveness. Yes, humans live short lives. Yes, they needed to sleep. No, they had not been in space very long. He said these things the way someone might describe the weather, as facts, not weaknesses. One young Velithari lord, glowing a sharp, mocking violet, asked Aiden what exactly he thought he could offer the Dominion that they did not already have. Aiden looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "A different way of thinking about the problem." The Lord laughed. Several others joined him. Aiden did not react. He simply picked up his drink, which Salith noticed he had not actually been drinking, and moved on to the next conversation. That night, in the quarters they now officially shared, Salith and Aiden stood on opposite sides of a room that was far too large for two people who had nothing to say to each other. A partition screen divided the sleeping area. They had not touched once outside the ceremony. Salith spoke first. "You should know that I intend to fulfill the terms of this arrangement with full respect for the treaty. I expect nothing from you beyond the same." Aiden nodded. "That sounds fair." "This posting to Station Idris 6, the border outpost. It is largely symbolic. We are not expected to see combat." "I understand." She studied him. His face gave away very little. For a human, he was remarkably still. "Do you have any questions?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "How do you take your tea, if you drink tea? Or whatever the equivalent is?" She blinked. Of all the things she had prepared herself to answer, questions about politics, protocol, the terms of their arrangement, this was not one of them. "Selhari root, steeped for 6 minutes, no sweetener," she said, almost automatically. And then he wished her good night and disappeared behind the partition. Salith stood alone in the blue glow of her own skin, feeling something she could not quite name. Not warmth, not affection, something smaller and stranger. The faint, irritating awareness that she had underestimated something, and she was not yet sure what. 3 days later they boarded a transport for the border. The war was waiting, and it did not care about their feelings. Station Idris 6 was not beautiful. It sat on the edge of Velitari-controlled space, like a metal tooth in a tired mouth. Functional, ugly, and just important enough that someone had to be there. 200 Velitari personnel, 31 humans, and one political marriage that no one on the station took seriously. The first 3 months were exactly what Salith had expected. The Velitari officers treated Aiden and his people the way one might treat a pet that had wandered into a strategy meeting, with polite confusion and quiet irritation. In joint tactical briefings, the Velitari commanders would present their analysis, ask for questions, and then talk over any human who tried to speak. Aiden never raised his voice. He never demanded respect. He simply attended every briefing, took notes in a small datapad, and returned to his section of the station, where his 31 soldiers trained like the war was already at their door. Salith watched this from the appropriate distance. Their shared quarters had settled into a quiet routine. He made her Selhari root tea every morning, steeped for exactly 6 minutes, no sweetener, without being reminded. She had not asked him to continue doing this after that first night. He did it anyway. She drank it without comment. She told herself she was observing him out of political necessity. She needed to understand this human to manage the alliance. It was strategy, not curiosity. But she was curious. He never slept a full cycle. She could hear him moving behind the partition at hours when the station was dark and silent. One night, unable to sleep herself, she checked the station's access logs and found that he spent most of his nights in the tactical analysis lab, running simulations. Not human battle simulations, Kreth ones. He was studying the enemy with the obsessive focus of a scholar writing the final work of his life. She began reading his reports. He filed them dutifully after every briefing, submitting tactical recommendations through proper channels. They were ignored, of course. She read them anyway. They were brilliant. He had identified patterns in Kreth's swarm behavior that the Velithari tactical AI had missed. Not because the AI was flawed, but because it was trained on Velithari assumptions about how war should work. The Kreth did not fight the way the Velithari expected an enemy to fight. But Aiden did not expect anything. He simply watched, measured, and adapted. His recommendations were not flashy. They were practical, specific, and quietly devastating in their implications. One report in particular caught her attention. He had found 3 critical weaknesses in the station's border defense grid, gaps in sensor coverage that a Kreth scouting force could exploit to approach undetected. He had submitted the report 4 weeks ago. No one had responded. Salith said nothing. She filed the knowledge away and continued watching. The break came on an ordinary Tuesday, or what passed for Tuesday on a station that ran on Velithari time cycles. A Kreth scouting flotilla, 6 fast bioships, breached the perimeter at Relay Point 7, exactly through one of the gaps Aiden had identified in his ignored report. The station's alert system activated. The Velithari response protocol kicked in, which meant the senior commander had to authorize the deployment, which meant confirming with the sector admiral, which meant waiting. Aiden did not wait. He scrambled his small human squadron, 8 fighters and 2 corvettes, without authorization, and threw them directly into the breach. Salith, monitoring from the command deck, watched the tactical display with growing disbelief as the tiny human force engaged the Kreth scouts using a fighting style she had never seen in any textbook. They did not form lines. They did not hold position. They scattered like startled birds, then reformed in shifting, unpredictable patterns, hitting the Kreth ships from odd angles, breaking away before the swarm coordination could target them, and hitting again from somewhere else. It was messy, it was chaotic, and it was working. By the time the Velithari response force finally launched, the Kreth scouts were already retreating. Aiden's squadron had not destroyed them. They were too small for that. But they had bought 9 critical minutes. And in those 9 minutes, the station's eastern sensor array, which the Kreth had been heading straight for, remained intact. The Velithari station commander, a tall and rigid officer named Falver, was furious. He summoned Aiden to the command deck and dressed him down in front of the entire senior staff. Insubordination, reckless endangerment, violation of chain of command. He demanded formal disciplinary action. Aiden stood and took it. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply said, "Understood, Commander," and waited to be dismissed. Salith sat through the entire proceeding with her expression perfectly neutral. But that evening, alone in her office, she pulled up the tactical data from the engagement and studied it for 2 hours. If the eastern sensor array had been destroyed, the station would have lost coverage of an entire approach corridor. The next Kreth attack, and there would be a next one, would have come through blind. Aiden had seen it. No one else had. And when no one acted, he had acted himself, knowing he would be punished for it. She found him in the tactical lab that night. He was running simulations again, not of the skirmish that had just happened, but of something much larger. On his screens, she could see models of a full-scale Kreth invasion force hitting their sector. The projected casualties were enormous. "Why did you do it?" she asked from the doorway. Her voice was the same cool, formal tone she always used with him. "You knew Commander Thalvor would not approve. You knew you would face consequences." He looked up from his screens. He looked tired. Not the dramatic, heroic kind of tired that showed up in Velithari war poetry. Just ordinary, human tired. The kind that came from too many nights and not enough sleep, and the slow weight of being surrounded by people who thought you were nothing. "Because no one else was going to," he said. It was not a boast. It was not bitter. It was just a fact, stated the same way he had stated facts about human lifespans at that reception months ago. The sky is blue. Water is wet. No one else was going to do it, so I did. Salith stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she stepped inside, pulled up a chair, and sat down next to him. "Show me what you are working on," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, not quite relief. Something closer to recognition, as if he had been waiting for someone to ask, and had almost given up hoping anyone would. He showed her, and for the first time since their bonding ceremony, they talked, really talked, for hours, about the Kreth, about the war, about the gaps in the defense grid, and the failures in doctrine, and the catastrophe that was coming if nothing changed. She did not agree with everything he said. He did not expect her to. But he listened to her counter-arguments with the same focused attention he gave to enemy fleet movements. And when she made a point he had not considered, he said so, without hesitation. When she finally returned to their quarters near dawn, her skin was glowing a soft, uncertain amber, a color she had not displayed in years. It meant something in Velithari emotional language that she was not prepared to examine. The long-range sensors updated 3 days later. A Kreth biofleet, larger than anything recorded in the sector, was massing 3 systems away. The readings were unmistakable. This was not another scouting run. The invasion was coming. And the only person on the station who had been preparing for it was the human everyone had been ignoring. The Kreth arrived on the 4th day, and they brought the end of the world with them. The biofleet that dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Idra corridor was 5 times the size of any projection. The station's sensors painted the incoming swarm as a wall of red, thousands of living ships, each one a nightmare of chitin, acid, and hunger, moving in the coordinated pulse of a hive mind that had been eating civilizations since before the Velithari built their first city. Commander Thalvor activated the defense protocol. The Velithari fleet arranged itself into the standard formation, a layered wall of capital ships backed by precision fire platforms, exactly as the doctrine prescribed. It was the same formation that had held the line for centuries against every enemy the Dominion had faced. It lasted less than 2 hours. The Kreth did not fight the way the doctrine expected. They came all at once, a living flood that hit the formation from every direction simultaneously. The Velithari ships held their positions because the doctrine said to hold positions. The Kreth swarmed around them, between them, behind them. Communications jammed, targeting systems overloaded. The beautiful, orderly formation became a killing box, and the Velithari were inside it. Thalvor sent increasingly desperate orders from the command deck. Hold formation. Maintain fire discipline. Follow the doctrine. His skin was flashing the rapid white of Velithari panic, and his voice was cracking. Then the communications array took a direct hit, and his voice was gone. In the silence that followed, with the Velithari fleet fragmenting and the chain of command shattered, a new voice appeared on the open channels. It was calm. It was clear. It was human. All ships, this is Captain Cole. Doctrine is broken. Switch to Channel 7. I have a plan. If you want to live, follow me. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then a Velithari destroyer captain named Orith, cut off from their own command, surrounded and out of options, responded. This is the Vanguard Orith, following your lead, Captain. Then another ship, then 3 more, then a dozen. Aiden did not try to rebuild the formation. He did the opposite. He told every ship to break apart, to scatter into small groups of 3 or 4, pick a target, hit it, and move. Do not hold position. Do not wait for orders. Strike, retreat, regroup, strike again. Trust your instincts. Trust your crew. If you see an opening, take it. He called it the Shatter Doctrine, and it was everything the Velithari had been trained to reject. It was messy, decentralized, and chaotic. It relied on individual initiative instead of top-down control. It was, by every standard of Velithari military tradition, madness. They were built to overwhelm a fixed target. When the target broke into 100 small, fast, unpredictable pieces, the swarm's coordination faltered. The hive mind could not track everything at once. For the first time in the battle, Kreth ships began dying faster than Velithari ones. Salith watched all of this from the station's command deck. She had taken over Thalvar's position after he had frozen at his console, staring at the tactical display with the blank, white glow of a mind that had stopped working. She did not have military command authority. She had something better, political authority, and she used it. When a surviving Velithari admiral on the far side of the corridor demanded that all ships return to formation and ignore the humans' orders, Salith invoked an ancient wartime provision, Article 12 of the Dominion Emergency Statutes, and formally transferred tactical command to Captain Cole. It would likely end her political career. The Velithari court would call it treason. She did it in 4 seconds, without hesitation, because the data on her screen was clear, and Salith had always trusted data over tradition. The battle raged for 3 more days. On the second day, the Kreth breached the station's hull. Boarding drones, eyeless armored things the size of ground vehicles, poured through the lower decks, killing everything in their path. The Velithari ground defenders fought bravely, but the drones were designed for close combat against species that relied on distance and firepower. Aiden came down from the tactical center with 22 human marines and met the drones in the corridors of Deck 9. Salith saw the helmet camera footage later. She watched it alone, 3 times, and each time she understood something new about the species she had married into. Humans were not stronger than the Kreth drones. They were not faster. They were not armored. But they fought with something that the tactical manuals did not have a word for. A furious, creative, almost joyful refusal to accept that they were supposed to lose. They used the station's architecture against the drones, collapsing corridors, venting atmosphere to create choke points, and fighting in the smoke and debris where the drone sensors were weakest. Aiden took a wound to his left side that would have sent a Velithari into shock, and he kept fighting for another 4 hours. He did not seem to notice. On the 3rd day, with the fleet still locked in battle outside, and the station barely holding together, Aiden found the key. Deep in the swarm formation, hidden behind layers of escort ships, was the Queen ship, the central node of the hive mind, controlling the entire assault. Kill the Queen, and the swarm would collapse into disorganized chaos. He wanted to lead the strike himself, a small, fast ship, punching through the swarm to deliver a killing blow. It was a suicide mission dressed up in tactical language, and everyone in the room knew it. Salith said no. She did not say it softly. She did not dress it up in politics or protocol. She looked at him across the command table, her skin blazing a deep, furious gold, and said, "You are not going. I will not authorize it. Find another way." The room went silent. A Velithari wife overruling her bonded partner in a military matter was not unheard of. But doing it publicly, in the middle of a battle, with that much fire in her glow, that was something else entirely. Aiden looked at her for a long moment. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with duty or alliance or politics. Then he nodded, once, and turned back to the tactical display. Salith personally coordinated a drone strike package, unmanned weapons guided by her own hand on the targeting console, threading them through gaps in the swarm that Aiden identified in real time from the battle data. It took 17 minutes and cost them 4 drone carriers. But the targeting solution was perfect. The Queen ship died in a bloom of fire that was visible from the station's observation deck. And the moment it died, the swarm stopped. Not slowly, Not gradually, all at once, like a puppet with its strings cut. Thousands of Kreth ships went silent, drifting, mindless. The corridor filled with the strange, terrible quiet of an enemy that had simply ceased to exist as a coordinated force. The Battle of the Idra corridor was over. They found Aiden on Deck 9, unconscious, propped against a wall, with his sidearm still in his hand. His suit was shredded. His blood, bright red, shockingly vivid against the pale Velithari metal, was pooled beneath him. By any reasonable medical assessment, he should have been dead. Salith carried him to the medical bay herself. He was heavy for his size, dense with muscle and bone in the way that humans were, built like something designed to survive impact. She carried him through corridors still smoking from the breach, past Velithari soldiers who stopped and stared, and she did not say a word. No one commented on it. In the days that followed, as the wreckage was cleared and the dead were counted, word spread across the communication networks. A border station had held against impossible odds. A Velithari fleet had been saved by a human captain who threw away the rulebook and wrote a new one in the middle of a battle. And the Kreth, for the first time in the war, had been not just stopped, but broken. On recovered Kreth drones, Velithari intelligence analysts found something unprecedented. New behavioral codes had been written into the swarm's base programming. Avoidance markers, keyed specifically to human ship signatures. The hive mind, in its alien collective way, had learned something it had never learned from the Velithari in 11 years of war. It had learned fear. And across Velithari space, in officer clubs and mess halls and the quiet corners where soldiers talked about the things that mattered, a name began to spread. Not a rank, not a title, just a name, spoken with the particular weight that soldiers reserved for the people who had earned the right to be remembered. The galaxy did not let Aiden Cole stay small. He tried. In the weeks after the Battle of the Idra corridor, while his body healed in the station's medical bay, he submitted a single after-action report, dry, factual, 5 pages long. He credited his human squadron, the Velithari ships that had followed his orders, and Salith's targeting solution that killed the Queen. He mentioned himself as little as possible. It did not matter. The story was already bigger than him. The Velithari media networks, tightly controlled, formal, and not accustomed to celebrating aliens, could not ignore what had happened. A human had taken command of a Velithari fleet and won a battle that should have been a massacre. The footage from the battle, leaked by someone on the station, spread across every inhabited system in the Dominion within days. Citizens who had never met a human watched Aiden's calm voice on the open channel, calling ships to follow him, and they heard something they recognized even across the species barrier, the sound of someone who was not afraid. The Velithari High Council summoned him, not as a curiosity this time, as a weapon. He was promoted to a Joint Command strategic role, the first human ever given operational authority over Velithari military assets. Half the council supported it because they had seen the data and understood what he could do. The other half supported it because the alternative was admitting that their own commanders had failed, and blaming a human was easier than blaming themselves. Salith navigated the politics with the precision of someone who had been trained for exactly this kind of war. The quiet, bloodless kind, fought in council chambers and private meetings. Archon Varani, her father, sent a message that was 3 lines long and colder than space. The expendable daughter had made herself impossible to ignore, and she had done it by elevating a human. This was not the plan. She did not respond to her father's message. She had work to do. Aiden began reshaping the war. He did not do this with speeches or grand strategy sessions. He did it the same way he did everything. Quietly, methodically, and with an obsessive attention to the details that other people missed. He studied every species in the Alliance. He learned what they were good at, what they feared, and where their doctrine broke down. Then he built something new. He called them the Ashwalker Battle Groups, mixed-species rapid response fleets that combined human aggression with Velithari firepower and discipline. Each battle group was small, fast, and trained to operate independently. They did not wait for orders from a central command. They were given objectives and trusted to figure out how to achieve them. It was a human idea wearing a Velithari uniform, and it worked beyond anyone's expectations. The first Ashwalker operation liberated the Sorvan system, 3 inhabited worlds that had been under Kreth occupation for 2 years. The second operation destroyed a Kreth breeding ground in the Keth Nebula. The third, fourth, and fifth came in rapid succession, each one pushing the swarm back further than anyone had thought possible. The victories were not clean, they were not easy. People died in every engagement, human and Velithari alike. But they were winning, and after 11 years of slow, grinding loss, winning felt like sunlight after a long winter. Aiden never took credit publicly. After each battle, he stood in front of the surviving crews and read the names of the dead, every single name, human and Velithari, pronounced correctly, given the weight they deserved. He did not give inspiring speeches. He did not need to. The act of remembering was enough. This, more than anything, was what turned respect into something deeper. The soldiers did not just follow him, they believed in him. Not the way one believes in a commander, the way one believes in an idea, or a promise, or something that cannot be broken. The Velithari had a word for it. They called him Ashavathar, an ancient term from their religious texts, meaning the one who walks through fire and does not burn. It was a title reserved for mythic figures, war saints from a time before recorded history. No living being had ever been called this. The fact that the first one was a human was either a miracle or an insult, depending on who you asked. Aiden hated it. He told Salith this late one night, in the private quarters they shared on the new command ship. The partition between their sleeping areas had come down weeks ago, not because of any dramatic moment, but because one morning Salith had simply removed it, and neither of them had mentioned it. They did not share a bed. They shared a space, which was somehow more intimate. "They are making me into something I am not," he said. He was sitting on the edge of his cot, and his hands were shaking. Salith had noticed the shaking before. It happened after casualty reports, always when he thought no one was watching. He had stopped trying to hide it from her. "You are what they need you to be," she said. She was standing by the observation port, her skin glowing a low, steady blue, the Velithari color of deep thought. "I am a man who does not know how to quit," he said. "That is not the same thing as a god." She turned to look at him. His face was older than it had been a year ago. Not just tired, weathered, like something that had been left out in a storm too long. Humans aged so quickly. She had known this intellectually. Seeing it on his face made it real in a way that hurt. "That is exactly what a deity would say," she told him. He almost laughed. It was not a happy sound, but it was real. And she found that she preferred his real, unhappy laughter to the polished confidence he showed everyone else. The Kreth, meanwhile, were adapting. The hive mind was a slow learner but a thorough one. After losing battle after battle to the Ashwalker doctrine, it did what hive minds do. It evolved. New Kreth organisms began appearing on the battlefield. The soldiers called them ruin tyrants, massive armored command creatures, each one a localized brain node capable of independent tactical thought. They were the Kreth's answer to human creativity. Decentralize the swarm so that killing one queen would not collapse the whole. The war entered its most brutal phase. The Ashwalkers still won more than they lost, but the margins grew thinner. Each battle cost more. Each victory tasted more like exhaustion than triumph. And through it all, Aiden kept going. He adapted his tactics. He found new weaknesses. He bled and healed, and bled again. The legend grew with every battle, fed by soldiers who had seen him walk into impossible situations and walk out alive. On the communication networks, Kreth intelligence analysts discovered something remarkable in intercepted swarm data. The hive mind had classified Aiden Cole as an apex threat organism, a category that the Kreth had previously reserved for extinction-level natural disasters, supernova, gamma-ray bursts, and now, one human. Salith watched all of this with the complex shifting glow of a woman who was watching the person she cared about most being slowly crushed by the weight of his own legend. She fought her own battles. Political assassination attempts from Velithari purists who saw the humans rise as an abomination. Court intrigues designed to strip him of command. Whisper campaigns that called her a traitor to her species. She endured it all with the same steel she had been raised with, but it was different now. Before, she had endured because duty demanded it. Now she endured because she chose to, because he was worth it. She never told him this in words. She did not need to. He knew it the same way she knew about his shaking hands, through the silent language of two people who had learned to see each other clearly. Then the intelligence reports came in, and the language of the war changed for the last time. Every remaining swarm fleet, every ruined tyrant, every reserve bioship from every occupied system was moving toward a single point. The target was not the border, it was not a strategic outpost. It was Velithar Prime, the homeworld, the heart of the Dominion, the symbol of everything the Velithari had built over 9,000 years. The swarm was coming with everything it had. And buried in the intercepted communications, repeated over and over in the hive mind's cold, mathematical language, was a single directive that the analysts translated with shaking hands. Priority 1. Locate and terminate the apex threat. They were not just coming for the homeworld. They were coming for him. The Crest Armada arrived at Velithar Prime on a day that the poets would later call the Long Dark. It was the largest biofleet ever recorded, a living wall of ships that stretched across the system like a bruise on the face of space. Sensors counted them in the tens of thousands. After a while, the counters stopped because the numbers had stopped meaning anything. Ruined tyrants led the vanguard, dozens of them, each one a mountain of chitin and rage, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a moon. Behind them, the swarm pulsed with a single, focused hunger. Not the blind hunger of previous invasions. This was directed. This was personal. The hive mind had studied its enemy, learned from every defeat, and built this fleet with one purpose encoded into every drone, every ship, every synapse of its collective consciousness. Kill the human. Kill everything he protects. End the threat forever. Aiden stood in the war room of the command ship Resolute and looked at the tactical display. The Ashwalker fleet, everything they had, every ship from every allied species, was arranged in the space between the Kreth and Velithar Prime. It was the largest allied force ever assembled. It was not enough. But Aiden had never needed enough. He just needed a plan. He called it Operation Heart's Blood, and when he explained it to the War Council, the room went very quiet. The plan was simple, in the way that terrible things are often simple. The Kreth were coming for him, specifically, personally, with everything they had. So he would give them what they wanted. He would take his flagship and a small decoy fleet and push directly into the swarm, broadcasting on every frequency, making himself the brightest target in the system. The Kreth would focus on him, because the hive mind could not help itself, because the Apex Threat Directive was burned into its deepest code. And while the swarm chased him, the main Ashwalker battle groups would execute a flanking maneuver and strike the core queen cluster from behind. He would be the bait, the worm on the hook, and the fish was the entire Kreth species. The Velithari admirals argued about tactics. The human generals debated timing. But it was Salith who broke the silence, and she did not argue about tactics. She stood up from the council table, her skin blazing a deep, violent gold that made every Velithari in the room flinch, and she said one word. No. The room went still. She was looking directly at Aiden, and for the first time since anyone had known her, the composed, controlled, politically perfect Lady Salith Varani was visibly shaking. No, she said again. I will not authorize this. You are not a sacrifice. Find another way. Aiden looked at her across the table, and something in his expression broke open. Not dramatically, not like a dam bursting, but like a door that had been locked for a very long time, finally swinging open. He asked for the room to be cleared. The admirals and generals filed out in uncomfortable silence. When they were alone, he spoke quietly. You married me for duty. Let me do mine. She stared at him. Then she shook her head slowly, and her glow shifted to something softer. Not gold, not blue, but a color that Velithari poets called Sereth, the shade of light at the edge of dawn. I did not, she said. Not anymore. They stood on opposite sides of the table, and for a moment, the war did not exist. There was just this. Two people who had started as strangers, bound by politics, separated by species, and somehow, through the slow accumulation of small recognitions and shared silences and tea brewed at 6 minutes with no sweetener, had arrived at something neither of them had expected. He walked around the table. He reached up. She was still taller, and touched her face. His hand was warm against her bioluminescent skin, and where he touched her, her glow brightened. It was the first non-ceremonial contact they had ever had. I am coming back, he said. You do not know that, she whispered. No, he agreed. But I am very hard to kill. You have seen the data. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and became Lady Salith Varani again. The woman who held the political line so that the man she loved could hold the military one. Then I will coordinate the flanking force from the defense platform, she said, and I will make it work. Go. He went. The Battle of Velithar Prime began at 1400 hours, and it was the most violent engagement in the recorded history of the galaxy. Aiden's decoy fleet, 40 ships crewed by volunteers who knew exactly what they were signing up for, plunged into the swarm like a fist into a hornet's nest. They fought with a fury that defied every tactical model the Kreth had built. They scattered, regrouped, scattered again. They used asteroids as cover, debris as weapons, and their own damaged ships as battering rams. Aiden's voice was on the open channel the entire time. Calm, clear, directing traffic in the middle of an apocalypse. The Kreth took the bait. The swarm's focus narrowed, tightened, concentrated on the small, loud, impossibly stubborn cluster of ships that contained the apex threat. Ruined tyrants peeled away from the main formation to chase him. Drone swarms redirected. The carefully planned invasion of Velithar Prime warped and bent around the gravitational pull of one man. On the defense platform orbiting Velithar Prime, Salith watched the tactical display and counted the seconds. The flanking force, 3 full Ashwalker battle groups, the largest strike force she had ever commanded, was circling wide around the engagement zone, hidden behind the system's gas giant. She needed the Kreth to commit fully to Aiden's position before she could strike the Queen cluster. Too late, and there would be nothing left of the decoy fleet. She waited. She watched Aiden's ships die one by one. She watched him transfer his flag from the Resolute when it was crippled, then to a cruiser, then to a destroyer, each ship smaller than the last, each one burning around him as the swarm closed in. And then the moment came. The Queen cluster, the brain of the entire swarm, was exposed, its escorts pulled away to chase Aiden. Salith gave the order. 3 battle groups hit the Queen cluster from 3 directions simultaneously. The space around it turned white with weapons fire. Kreth escort ships, caught out of position, scrambled to respond. It was too late. But the battle was not over. In the chaos of the flanking strike, the swarm did not collapse immediately. The ruined tyrants were maintaining local control, keeping the drones fighting, even as the queens died. The window between the queen cluster's destruction and the total collapse of the swarm was closing, and in that window, the Kreth were still killing. Aiden, aboard a crippled gunship with a crew of 7, saw what needed to happen. The primary queen, the oldest, the strongest, the central node that the other queens orbited, was still alive, buried in the wreckage of the cluster. As long as it lived, the ruined tyrants had a signal to follow. He aimed his gunship at it. His crew did not argue. They had volunteered for this. They understood. Aiden transmitted one final message on the command channel. Not words, just data. Targeting coordinates for the Ashwalker fleet, precise enough to finish the job after he opened the door. Then, on a private channel, the one he and Salith used for the quiet conversations that no one else heard, he sent 2 words. Choose well. Salith heard them on the defense platform. Her skin went white. Pure, blinding white. The Velithari expression of something beyond grief, beyond fear. A color that had no name because it was not meant to be felt by the living. The gunship hit the primary queen at full speed. The modified electromagnetic pulse weapon in its cargo bay detonated on impact, sending a wave of disruption through the hive mind's neural network. For 11 seconds, exactly 11 seconds, every Kreth ship in the system went dark. The Ashwalker fleet fired everything they had. When the light faded, the queen cluster was gone. The primary queen was gone. And the Kreth swarm, severed from its mind, shattered into a million mindless fragments that drifted through the system like leaves in a dead wind. The battle was over. Velithar Prime was saved. Search and rescue found the gunship 2 hours later, tumbling through a debris field that had once been the heart of an empire of hunger. The ship was broken in half. The crew compartment had been torn open to vacuum. 3 of the 7 crew were dead. 2 more died before the rescue ship arrived. Aiden was in the pilot's seat, strapped in, unconscious, his suit breached in 4 places, his body broken in ways that the Velithari medical team had never seen a living person survive. His heart had stopped twice during the impact. His suit's emergency system had restarted it both times, a crude, brutal human technology that simply shocked the heart until it agreed to keep working. They brought him to the medical bay on Velithar Prime. The best doctors in the Dominion worked on him for 16 hours. When they were done, the chief surgeon, a Velithari who had been practicing medicine for 2 centuries, stepped out of the operating room and said, with the bewildered tone of someone whose understanding of biology had just been rewritten, "He should not be alive. Nothing in his physiology explains why he is alive." Refused to stop. Salith was waiting outside. She had been there for all 16 hours. She had not eaten, had not slept, had not spoken to anyone. Her skin was still that terrible, nameless white. When they let her in, she sat beside his bed and waited. He woke 3 days later. The first thing he saw was her face. Her glow dim, exhausted, but steady, the soft blue of deep water. He tried to speak. His voice was wrecked. She stopped him. She put her hand over his, her long, luminous fingers covering his battered human ones, and she said the words she had been composing in the silence of 3 days. "You are not a god. You are not a myth. You are a man who kept his word. That is enough. That was always enough." He closed his eyes. His hand turned under hers and held on. In the months that followed, the Kreth swarm, shattered, queenless and mindless, broke apart into scattered remnants. Pockets of resistance were hunted down by Ashwalker patrols. Occupied worlds were liberated. The war that had lasted over a decade ended not with a single dramatic moment, but with a slow, exhausted exhale. Aiden refused every title they tried to give him. He would not accept Ashavathar. He would not accept sainthood. He would not accept the command of the combined fleet. He asked for one thing: a posting as warden of the Idra corridor, the border where it had all begun, the place where a man and a woman who had been strangers and first learned to see each other. Salith went with him, not because duty required it, because she chose to. Her father, Archon Varani, sent a formal declaration recognizing their marriage bond as one of genuine union, the highest honor a Velithari house could grant, an acknowledgement that what had begun as politics had become something real. It was the closest thing to an apology that a Velithari Archon was capable of. The rebuilt station Idra 6 was smaller than the original, but it had an observation deck with a wide viewport that looked out at the stars of the corridor, the same stars that had watched a small fleet hold the line against the impossible. Aiden and Salith stood there on their first evening back. The station was quiet. The war was over. The galaxy was still broken in 1,000 places, but it was healing, slowly, the way all living things healed, imperfectly, stubbornly, one day at a time. She reached down and took his hand. He led her. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. Across the galaxy, in barracks and temples, on colony ships and in prayer halls, soldiers of every species told the story. They told it differently, depending on who was telling it. The humans made it funnier, the Velithari made it grander, and every version was a little bit wrong and a little bit true. But the heart of it was always the same: a woman who married for duty, a man who became a god, not because he wanted to, but because he refused to let anyone else carry the fire. And in the end, standing together in the starlight, they were just two people who had found each other in the middle of the worst thing the galaxy had ever seen, and had decided, quietly, stubbornly, in the way that mattered most, to stay.